Hello. At the end of the season, I have about 3 pounds of green tomatoes, and I'm going to use them to make mincemeat. I start by washing them and cutting off the tops. And I'll set those aside and core and peel an equal amount of apples. So 3 pounds of tomatoes, prepared tomatoes, and 3 pounds of prepared apples. Both the tomatoes and the apples came from my small kitchen garden. After I've cleaned them up, cored them, and peeled the apples, I dice both the tomatoes and the apples. In this case, I'm making fairly small chunks of tomatoes. I'll make the apple chunks a little bit bigger. This is the most time-consuming part of making green tomato mincemeat. Now, a lot of mincemeats actually use meat or suet. This one is all vegetarian. As I get the tomatoes and the apples minced, I throw the pieces into a large cooking pot. And my cooking pot's about 2 gallons, and I'm going to fill it almost right to the top. Okay, I didn't get it almost right to the top. It's about 3/4 full. I'm throwing in some dried blueberries that I have no other use for. And then a bag, about a pound of raisins. I'd actually like to put in a few more, but I just don't have them on hand. It may seem unlikely, but I'm actually going to cut up an entire orange and put the whole thing in, peels and all. The trick here is to make very small chunks, and while you might not normally think about eating an orange peel, when you bite into a little chunk of orange peel in the mincemeat, it throws a whole explosion of flavor into it. Also going to squeeze the juice from 1 lemon in. I like to roll it hard on the cutting board before I cut into it, get it really soft. And that just makes the juice flow more easily when I finally get to squeezing it. I use that classic method now of holding the half lemon in my hand and catching the seeds in my palm as I'm squeezing the juice out. Okay, listen. That's the sound of a frozen ginger root. I keep the stuff in my freezer because it kind of stays fresh that way. And I'm grating about 1 tablespoon into the pot. Then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of ground cinnamon, all my ground cloves, which totals about 2 teaspoons, maybe a little more, and about 2 teaspoons of nutmeg. Then a tablespoon of salt, and finally a whole lot of brown sugar. I've got 4 1-pound bags, so altogether I'm putting in 4 pounds of brown sugar. Usually comes in 2-pound bags, so you'd only need 2 of them in that case, obviously. I'm just packing it down because I have actually filled the pot, and now I'm adding 1 cup of cider vinegar. And it's ready for the stove. On a temperature dial that goes from 0 to 9, I've set the temperature to 3, and I'm stirring all the stuff together to get the brown sugar and the vinegar and all the seasonings mixed in. An hour later, it's just cooked up a little bit. 2 hours in, it started to reduce a lot, and the color is really changing. 3 hours in, it's very, very dark, and we've reduced the volume quite a bit. And now about 3 hours and 20 minutes in, this is ready to go in a canning jar. I have 3-quart jars in a pot where I can get about 1 inch of water over the tops of them. I've got lids and bands for the jars in water that's not boiling. And I lift a jar out, pour the water out, and set it on a plate to catch anything I might drip. Then it's basically a matter of ladling the cooked mincemeat out of the pot while it's still hot and filling the jars with it. I need to leave a ½ inch of space from the top of the mincemeat to the top of the jar. That's called head space. And I noticed that I've got a little too much in here, but before I adjust that, I'm going to poke around with a chopstick to release air bubbles. Now I'm taking down the volume just a little bit, not even a tablespoon. Just want to make sure it's not too full. Putting on one of the hot lids from the pot. I kept it hot but not boiling, and then I'm screwing on a band. And I tighten the band down pretty well. You got to use something to hold the jar because it's very hot with that hot mincemeat in it. And they call it finger tight, but you know, I'm kind of wailing on it a little bit. Because it's all very hot, I use a jar lifter to put this down in the hot water. When I have all the jars full, I make sure they're covered with at least 1 inch of water and it's boiling. Then I put a lid on, I wait 20 minutes, take the lid off, and take the jars out of the water. Set the jars on a towel to cool down to room temperature. Make sure they seal. The lid should bow down in the middle. They'll keep for about a year or maybe longer, and one jar should fill 1 pie.